to Asheville, North Carolina.
Oh, cool.
I have never been there.
Oh, it's nice.
We're from Charleston, West Virginia, so it's not too far away. But yeah, for the first time in a very long time, we're doing a family vacation. First time ever, it'll be on Christmas.
Wow. That sounds fun.
Yeah, I wish we were going south to warmer weather, but the whole country is going to be very cold at that time. So it'll be going from this to more of the same, despite driving hours and hours south.
Oh, no. Oh.
That's great.
It'll be good.
Yeah, that's great. Well, good luck with that.
Be a lot of time in the car.
Yeah.
A lot of time to read.
Bring the whole family or just like a couple people?
Yeah, I don't have a huge extended family, so it's just my parents and brothers and boyfriend.
It's like, yeah, it's still a lot of people in one car for that long, so.
And it'll be 2 cars because we also have 2 dogs.
Oh, yeah. Great. So welcome to the meeting here. This is the last meeting of the year, calendar year. So we'll be back, I think, January 7th, and I'll pick up. I know that we've been busy with things, and it's kind of been the end of the term, and Brian's going to tell us about his term project that on Monday I was able to attend their presentation for the project or their program that they're working on. They're working in a class, and like an end of the semester report on that. So it looked pretty good, but we'll go over that in a bit. First, I wanted to ask if there were any updates. People wanted to just mention things, where things stand with different projects and so forth.
I have not had a chance to record my presentation for the open house. I'm sorry. I know it's very late. I will do it before the holidays.
Okay. Yeah, and then if you do that, and I can have you upload it to I usually use a drive to retrieve the video and put it up on YouTube, and we'll have whatever you choose to talk about in it. That'll be part of our open house channel, which is actually quite a few videos. So thank you. Yeah, that's good. That would be a nice addition to that. And then so that's good. Thank you. Brian, did you have an update? I mean, we don't have to do the class presentation now, but just short.
Sure. Because I'd like to do the class if either Morgan or Hussein are in the meeting. That would be really helpful to get their feedback on the class project stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like I've talked everybody who's here's ear off about it already. You guys are so helpful, so I don't want to bug you more about it. Updates for me: I finished my Bachelor's of Science, all A's, yay. And that's pretty much the only update I have. I'm still recovering from the semester, but it went well. Thank you.
Well, that's great. Yeah. Jesse, if you're available right now. Got a message in the chat when I joined. Here's doing weird stuff, sound stuff. Be right back.
That was me before everybody else came in. I have this organ patch on my computer that I was playing with and playing like thinking da 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 da, see if anybody can hear it, but nobody can hear it. So that was all that was.
Yeah. I don't know if he's there or not. Okay.
How about you, Bradley? Do you have any updates? What have you been up to?
I mean, I've been working on different things. I've been finishing up some papers and finishing up some talks. I just posted a talk in the DevoWorm YouTube account on the embryo networks work that the group has been doing over the past 5 years. So it's a lot of stuff in there. It's like an hour long. So it's it kind of goes over. I realized I'd never given a talk on all of it, just kind of like conference talks and things like that. And so that's all up there. It's a very wide-ranging talk, but it goes over a lot of the different papers that we've done on the topic. And then I've been preparing for sort of the holidays and next year, and so I've been strangely busy, like with different things. But yeah, it's I don't have any other updates really.
I just looked up that talk too, and that looks fascinating. I can't wait to watch this.
Yeah. So I mean, this is what happens when you have a topic where you start at maybe a 5-year window where you start with a project or a presentation, work it into a paper, and then you have a number of papers that kind of lead from it. And it's always spinning it into sort of a coherent project or a coherent set of work. So you can go from you start with a presentation or an idea, then you get that down, then you get a paper, then you get maybe another presentation, and you keep sort of doing new things in each presentation. Like we went to NetSci several years, so I think in 2017 and 2020 and 2021, 2022. So we had those years where we did like an annual presentation that changed every year, and so yeah, I mean it was definitely it does lead it down different paths, so you can start to say I do a presentation on something, and then I give it and I get feedback, and then I say, wait, there's these 2 slides in here that are interesting. I wonder if we can like build on that. And then you come to a new realization, which is like we need to use this type of analysis or tool. And then you go to that and you work that out, you work that into a presentation, maybe a paper. And you say, what else can we put together for this? Like, what other areas can we look into? Like network science is interesting, but a lot of the innovation is happening at the edges. So like with network science, you have the standard, if you're familiar with social networks or other types of networks where, they're looking at connectivity matrices and they're plotting what they call these hairballs. And then you get network statistics, and you can look for communities and things like that. But a lot of the innovation is happening at the edges of that world. So you have a network, and then you might have you might want to use something like category theory, or you might want to use something like machine learning or game theory, or there are other types of multi-layered networks, for example, those kind of methodologies that are less common in the mainstream of network theory, but people still do them. So there are other opportunities to move from that basic model into new areas. And so in the talk, there are a number of different things, these allied areas that are explored as well. So I noticed when I went to network science last year, there's network science, which is basically complexity science. And you get a lot of talks on like social networks, on like social media analysis, and you get a lot of talks on like brain networks with something like fMRI, where you can extract networks of activity. You have other types of networks, like economic networks even. And then like people have been using a lot of machine learning to gain insights into the network, or even people have moved into like topological data analysis, which is an area where people look at the shape of something and they use math to analyze that shape. So like, in networks, you get a lot of triangles and things like that. And so you can analyze those in traditional graph theory, which is like 100 years old or more. People have done this where they've looked at triangles and other types of structures by looking at them in a new light, especially with the kind of technologies we have now with huge data sets, and we have, large computational power where we can look across the network of like 1 million nodes to, sort of, make an inventory of all of the triangles in the network and where are they and what do they mean. So I guess that's a really interesting area. I also attended this last week I attended a conference on something called Learning on Graphs, and is interesting because there's this area, and we doing some work in the DevoWorm group on it last summer in Google Summer of Code. It was on graph neural networks. Have you heard of graph neural networks, Brian? Okay. Because this is kind of a specialized area of machine learning. It's not necessarily very mainstream yet, but people are doing a lot of work on it. So what graph neural networks are using sort of machine learning techniques, deep learning techniques to look at graphs or to create these graph embeddings. And so graph embeddings are just these little graph motifs that might have like a number of nodes and they're connected. And then you're extracting these out of data. So you're trying to find graph embeddings that you can then use to represent the data that you're analyzing. So people use this for a number of different techniques. And I attended this conference. It was there were workshops which I didn't attend, but the talks were pretty interesting because there was a lot of stuff with like there were a lot of like basic machine learning and deep learning techniques that they've sort of modified for graph neural networks. There's also a lot of math theory, which is kind of, it's tough to get through. If you look at some of the problems that they're setting up, it's more like applied math than computer science. So they're like looking at different mathematical tools to, do these analyses, do them better. Because you often run into, computational issues where you don't have enough memory to search a space because you're looking for graphs, which are these structures that have a lot of complexity. And then when you get to any reasonable size, and so, you want to make those algorithms more efficient. So a search algorithm, for example, if you make it more efficient by, structuring the graph in a certain way, you can do searches, you can build these embeddings, and you can do other things with them. And then, they had, I didn't attend the tutorials, but people have implemented all this in in different notebooks and things like that. So there are things that you can grab today and start using. It's not just theoretical. So it was really interesting. I was impressed with the advances that are being made in that field. A lot of tie-ins to the NeurIPS workshops that happened on it. I know we mentioned when Jesse went over the NeurIPS materials that there were a couple of different workshops on graph neural networks, and they had brought. I think there were a couple groups that were involved in some of those workshops. So it was interesting. So it was a really interesting workshop. I mean, I'm still kind of digesting it. So I may have more to say in the next DevoWorm meeting or something on it. But
Yeah, this looks great. I'm looking at their Slack and looking at all their papers that they've posted on Open Review. This just looks fascinating stuff. So thank you, Bradley. This is awesome.
Yeah. And so in DevoWorm last summer we worked on, kind of getting into graph neural networks for data analysis. And, I mentioned that we do this embryo networks where this is sort of next step in that. Like I said, you can go to allied areas and find insights. So one of those is going from complex networks or graphs of the embryo to embryo or graph neural networks. And so the idea is to take microscopy data. You can segment cells out of the microscopy data. So you have a bunch of data set with a bunch of cells, basically, and you have to find the cells and maybe find some features within the cells and then build these networks. And so you use some criterion and you build the networks. Well, you can actually you can extract the data, you can build the networks or the graph motifs, which are not just kind of taking the data and using a standard approach of, finding the connectivity matrix and all this. Instead, you're actually searching for things that are common relationships within the data. So it's a bit like, a standard machine learning approach where you're searching for data, or you're searching for patterns in the data, but you're using the graph as sort of a structuring technique. So you're using that to structure the common things that are going on in the data set. So that was where we kind of ended last year. And this next year, I'd like to expand it a little bit more. I don't know if we can get funding for it, but it'll probably be like a follow-up, because the students who worked on it last year did a pretty good job, and we've put it into this broader package that we're working on called DevoWorm, which is it's like a deep learning based project where we're able to take data sets, analyze them, segment the cells into objects, and then we have the objects, and then we can do things with them downstream. So we had the cell segmentation engine, and that was the main part of it. There was what they call pre-trained model, which is where you train the model for certain data sets or types of data, and then you don't have to put a lot of training data in for any one data set that you use. So like for an embryo, you would use pre-trained data, and then that model is set and ready to go. And then if you use any data set you want, you can plug it in, and it does pretty well without having a lot of training data up front. So the advantage is you don't have to have a training set and a testing set, if you're familiar with those terms. You just have the testing set, and you run it through the model, and there you go. And then the graph neural networks module would sit on the end of that process, where you can actually find patterns in the data using that. And so, but the thing is, we haven't developed it very much. It's sort of like a proof of concept. There's a lot more work to do. But quite honestly, I'm not really sure what the next steps really should be yet. I got to think about that more.
Is that related to like few shot learning? This idea of only feeding testing data in and then using that testing data because Hugging Face had a thing I wanted to go to yesterday on few shot learning, and I think it's a similar process. But this is really interesting. I can't wait to look more into this.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's like a competing technique or if I don't think it's related, but it's I think it's the same principle where you're using like the data set to or you're doing it in a different way, you're training it in a different way. So you have in traditional training of a model, you have a training set, you have a testing set, and it effectively divides the amount of data you have in half. So you can't use all of your data that you have. And then there are issues with like load balancing, where if you have to have the same number of cases, but if you divide them up at random, you don't know where the structure is in your data. So, and then of course with certain types of data sets, you can't just assign things at random. You need to have like a certain number of data points from each class. Like if I were to take like a car, an image of a car, I couldn't just feed the algorithm like all front ends of the car and then expect it to recognize the entire car. It would recognize the front end, and that would be that. But it would, I need to have a good representative sampling of every thing that I want to see in that image. So I bring that up because that's important for a lot of the kinds of things that, you do in biological data analysis. You have different focal planes of microscopy data. You have different geometric features that aren't like geometric features that you feed in. They kind of emerge from the image. If you were to take, like what you do is when you image an embryo, you acquire stacks of images, and they go from the top to the bottom, and then you put those together. And if you take those images and you segment them and you take the points that you get a sphere, right? Or a shape, an oblong shape. And that's the structure that you have, but you have to extract that. So, recognizing that up front is not going to be easy. You can do that later, but it's a lot of work. So there are a lot of things like that you have to worry about. But yeah, I mean, this is a package. It's called DevoLearn. I'll put a link to it in the chat if you want. I don't think I've ever talked about it too much in this group. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because if we go for GSOC again, I may, and I try to, I'm sure we'll do something in this. I know we'll do something in this, um, group as well. We'll be following up on the open source ethics, but I wanted to point this out because usually we do things in parallel with DevoWorm. We do a DevoWorm project and a orthogonal lab project. So this will be probably the DevoWorm project based off of some of the stuff going on in DevoLearn, and then the orthogonal lab project will probably be the open source ethics. But I wanted to, I know Brian probably wants to look at it, maybe Jesse and Amanda if you want to.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at it now. It's beautiful, and it's funny. I've been running into this because I lurk on the DevoWorm everything every once in a while, and so it's really exciting to actually take a little more time to look into this. You guys have beautiful imagery on your GitHub. Read.
Oh yeah, I guess I don't know. I don't know if who that was. Like what is the?
Did it? But it looks great.
Yeah.
It's like just looking at it, you're like, wow, whoa.
Yeah. We do have a logo for it, but I don't know. So that was a project that DevoLearn started in like 2020, and it was we started with the pre-trained models, and we kind of worked out. This has been like the product of about 3 or 4 years of summer of code and some open source contributions. So it's like the one project that I have that's really mature in terms of the open source aspect. And in fact, I can go over it a little bit. We can talk about it.
Even just as an example of how to kind of push, for example, the computational models for AI ethics forward, this seems like a great example because I'm looking at the DevoLearn repo in particular, and I love how it has these things up at the top where you guys have your own logo, and tests are passing, the code, like all the issues that are open, the contributors, the last commit. It's just awesome. This is great.
Yeah, I didn't even think about this as being a good model for open source, but now that we're here, so this is the DevoLearn. This is this DevoWorm has its own like GitHub presence, but this was DevoLearn. We decided to come up with a new repo and organization for people to contribute. So this is the core DevoLearn software, and then we have the DevoGraph, which is the graph neural networks software, and we have this DevoLearn Web, which is an educational aspect. Like this is like putting together different models, and then this is data science demos, which actually is an opportunity I gave people during the pandemic, but also kind of more generally, because we get a lot of applicants in summer of code, and they do things, but they don't get selected. And they get the opportunity to put data science demos together. So they're data science demos here, but also the software. Now this software is published on I can't remember what it is. It's the Python repository where you release things. You know what I'm talking about? Okay.
Yeah, pip. I mean, pip, Pypo. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Pypy, yes.
Yeah.
It's Saturday. It's early. Okay. We have a release on Pypy, which is good to have if you want to make a formal release. One of the things we learned from this project is that you get a lot of, you want to be able to make it accessible to people to download, because just throwing it up on GitHub isn't necessarily going to cut it. Because people want to have like a package. They want to know, like what the latest version is, and sometimes it can be kind of hard to understand like what the latest version is when you have like a list of files that are like V13, V14. So that's always useful. And a lot of open source projects have that anyways. If they have like a website where you download something. So like if you do like Ubuntu, or if you do like OpenOffice or any of those, they always have like a site where they have the latest release highlighted and release notes. So that's all stuff you can actually do using PyPy and then also this GitHub organization. So let's see. So yeah, setting up your own organization. We've done this for Orthogonal Lab, but it allows you to get people who are contributors, and they can join the organization and they can become participants, contributors. So this is the DevoLearn. So we have like the basic software here. This is actually, the other reason you want to have like a PyPy release or something like that, and a GitHub presence, is because on the GitHub repo you're often making updates. So it's not really a release here. You're just, your people are pushing. There are actually some open pull requests here for some reason, but there's some issues. And you have people who are actively just contributing things into the software. And so if you download the version here, you're getting a version that, is kind of like in its current state. It may or may not be fully pushed or whatever. I don't know. Things happen. So we haven't made a release in a while on this, so I don't know. We're going to try to do it maybe this coming year before Summer of Code maybe. We were going to do it this fall, but it didn't happen. So that's the joys of open source. But this is the README. This is the logo we came up with. And then this is just like a nice README where you have notebooks and, you have like demos. So this is a demo that just shows you how it works. So step by step, you're extracting data from a microscopy image. And as you can see, you have these cells that you're trying to draw lines around the edge, find the centroid or the center point, and then find maybe like the relationships between them. This isn't the graph neural network. This is just the way the algorithm is working to sort of figure out where the center is. And then this is a distance matrix, and you plot it out as a set of points in the three-dimensional space. You can do all that in Python, and then you segment the cell membrane. And segmenting the cell membrane is a particularly hard problem, as it turns out. We've been working on this for several years to get it to a point where it's really decent. And, this is C. elegans, but you couldn't necessarily use these same techniques on other embryos. So this is where this pre-training comes in handy, because if you have like a nice model of like a cell and what it looks like and what the boundaries are, then that's good for the algorithm to latch on to those boundaries. So, and then you're able to get the cell nucleus segmented and the center point made. And then you can actually, from there, then you can start to move on. You can actually create synthetic embryos. This is using a generative network, generative adversarial network, where you're actually making these synthetic embryos out of the data. And then you can actually predict populations, because in C. elegans we know the identity of each cell and its position from its position in the image, and so we can build these graphs where you have how many cells of each lineage are in the image at any given time. So you can actually do those sorts of dynamical analyses, and then or dynamic analyses. And then these are some data sets that we use to train it. And Mayok has actually been the maintainer for this. So he's been working to incorporate a lot of the pull requests that we get. We have pull requests usually around Google Summer of Code time, either before or after. So, that's another thing. If you're building a GitHub organization like that, you want to have a maintainer, or you want to find someone who can be a maintainer, because that's a critical part of it. Being able to make changes if you have new versions that you want to put out. You may have new features you want to put into the software, and those are all important to have someone say, yes, this looks good, or this needs work, or whatever. With open source, theoretically, anyone can contribute. And it could be someone who's using it and they just say, well, we need to have this. But sometimes they don't know what they're doing. If you know the software, or even if it just doesn't make sense to another pair of eyes. It's like writing a paper, right? You write a paper and it's like, it's crap, but you don't recognize it because it's your own work, and so it's the same principle. Okay, yes, Jesse Parent says, on the 12 days of open source my dev team gave to me. Yes, that's very good. Yeah, so that's a little bit on the. I kind of made a very circuitous path there from the Learning on Graphs conference to the stuff that's going on with open source, but I think it's an interesting set of things going on there. So Jesse, are you available to give an update, or do you want to?
Yeah, I actually just got in. I had an errand, which was also a run this morning. So I did a hasty run to an undisclosed location. I had to ship something out. My update, I'm trying to be articulate in my updates, which is not guaranteed. The last 2 weeks, and in some ways, honestly, since November, so kind of almost 2 months now, I've been on this sort of, it's through other people I'm working with, but I've had a tremendous amount of experience at the nexus of technology product design, implementation, the user interfacing with the user base at different levels, from end users to the people that end users are trying to use the technology on. A lot of like the physical infrastructure involved in that, and how there's sort of this timeline between big idea, big long-term idea, and like medium-term and short-term implementations that are much more readily available, and how you move along that trajectory in an implementation sense. And to that end, I've worked with startups before, but I've never been at a technology implementation. I've never been in the field implementing technology, and particularly in like a early, I don't really know how to say this, but like beta, or like almost like beta as a different product altogether, as opposed to like there has to be a specific term for like when you're getting people used to this idea, but what you're giving, what's available right now is, and what's available in different ways in terms of either policy or like what's tenable in the moment, and then the long-term arcs of things, and how much like there's like such like tectonic plates of timelines involved in this, and I've never really been exposed to it. Another way of saying what I've been doing the last 2 weeks is just like terrible grunt work of debugging and like on-site stuff that's just a mess and not really fun stuff. But there's been these bits and pieces of other stuff that I've really come to put together along the way. And I feel like we just had a conversation about open source, which is sort of in some ways a very different flavor than what we just talked about, and in some ways not a different flavor, because you have even like the releases, and we're not necessarily being super strategic about like how to market and get a lot of people to use DevoWorm, but it's still a factor, even if we're not trying to make money off of this in open source land. Like there's still this sense of what can be released now, and it's been a really super interesting context for me to deal with that. I'm quite exhausted. I'm sure Brian relates in the own way, and I know Manny's been busy too, and everybody's busy this time of year for anything academic-y stuff. But like I'm exhausted from what I said to you specifically, and but it's just been, there's very little I can say directly about any of what I'm saying, but it's been really, really, really good, particularly in terms of, and one thing I've been exploring, and I will put a, I don't know, what's the equivalent, like you said, I'm going to put a pin in this and come back to it later. It's like, I'm going to reference this pin on the wall that I've had on the wall for a long time, but then go back to my main line of conversation. The pin is the We Robot blog post. That's been on my mind so much, because that post is basically morphing into something that I'm basically going to call like We Robot as a spiritual successor to Princeton and Vision, with like the real title. I don't know which is going to be the real title or the subtitle, but like the real title is Understanding the Lay of the Land on like I want to like something like our tech, like our future in technology, because technology, we're starting to see these things come out like ChatGPT, obviously DALL-E, the large language models, all this stuff. And as I'm going to keep copying this guy's term, Daniel Fagella, he's kind of a futurist and has very interesting insights. Some of them are controversial, but he uses the term programmatically generated everything. And I think that's an extreme trend. And some things are definitely happening in the sense of like, you can just get anything you want generated in an AI fashion. And whether it's like an experience or an identity or a way of relating to the world, and so on and so forth. But that's like one extreme. And then you have sort of these, that I have such more context now for technology on that front to just generatively create something based off of a prompt, or it's some kind of a little more related to what I'm looking at recently in terms of some health tech stuff, based off of your data, your collected data over time, your health data, your mood data. There's an article I've yet to look here in this month's IEEE Spectrum. There's a article called I just show it like this: workplace brain scanning ? Leveraging brain data will make workers happier and more productive, backers say. Which, you know, isn't that a little bit Orwellian almost? Like, well, is it Orwell or is it the other one that I get confused with? Either way, it's a little potentially dystopian. Yeah. And you might give some pause. But like, I was just at let me fucking show and tell. I'm so sorry. Since I was at the Augmented Brains event. Some of that stuff is very, let's create the media lab, MIT Media Lab, kind of fluid interfaces group. A lot of their stuff is like very specific use case. Let's make a cool high-tech product for that right now. A lot of the things in the Media Lab are kind of that way, but not necessarily. But where I'm going with all this is that across so many of these different, I think I have a context developing it's very new to me, which is you have this rise in programmatically generated capabilities. You have this people who want these sort of instantaneous implementations for things. And then certain things at bigger infrastructural levels, like a lot of what I'm doing with my other group right now is certain devices collecting certain data, but incorporate into these other larger, much larger, slower changing systems. Like the change of systemic change is not like is its own timeline. And there's sort of these different things where there's a movement between larger systemic changes, and you'll see I'm going somewhere with this that's much more academic related to us, but I'm talking about in like a technology space right now. You have these structures that are pretty embedded and established. They can be like databases, they can be even just like a bureaucratic company in of itself. Like there's these big chunks of things that are slow moving, and they're sort of pulled in certain directions by these implementations. Like, oh, like a lot of stuff like this kind of data acquisition, or this we can get a lot of data input this way, and then we can get the feedback from our new LLMs, our new deep learning, our new AI. We can use that data input to generate this project and this cycle, and that will spin it, and that will pull the big infrastructure in one direction. And that's like understanding how that goes, and where like some things you have to plan at a, not necessarily infrastructure, but like at a midway point between the infrastructure you have and the infrastructure you want. Like, where's that big plate going to move? And then where are these other pieces that are pulling it with the feedback loops coming? Like that is something that I have never been exposed to in a direct way, but I feel like it's really good experience that I've come to understand, both at like a high level decision making to like how do you talk to the people who are on the front lines using this. Like I've gotten a lot of that experience in the last, I guess, year, but especially the last couple months. So how does this more directly relate to the lab? I think it's not quite as simple, because a functioning system that's explicitly doing things in the world is vastly different, as we may know, from a theoretical system that exists in papers in our minds. Like the system that Fuchs talks about doesn't have a, there's people with ideas who've written books, but that's not as explicit or as grounded in reality perhaps as your database servers, the new devices you're hooking up, the wireless connection, and the interfaces, the web interfaces and the GUIs that you're making so people can interact with the data, the user experience and the user design in that sense. Like that's a little bit different. However, I think there are interesting parallels. And if we're talking about how do we make, at least as far as I think this is pretty obvious, but to say it, when I approach cognitive science, I say something that like, okay, this is cool. I don't know if I'm committed to some of the premises of how people are using this. I really like how other people are doing it. I want to move this in a particular direction. I feel like there's actually quite a lot of parallels to what I'm talking about, even if the material nature of what we're talking about is super different. Like there's these big, slow-moving tectonic plates that have some ability to like glacially be pushed in a certain direction, but also there's certain things that they cannot ever do. So it's like what's your, given as a researcher, your task in a lot of ways is like, okay, what of these big plates do I want to link my stuff to and pull, or do I want to develop making a new plate or not? And where do I want to go with my ideas, and how are my ideas pushing something forward or not? Like, because you can kind of have these disassociated ideas or like theoretical things, like, oh, I like to just develop this. And that's not an invalid way to do things. That's a great way to do things. But depending on where you are in that process and depending on the changes you want to see and where you want to go with it, there's a lot of, I guess, strategy. And we don't, like, it feels kind of weird to talk about this. I think it's quite implicit and a big part, like a lot of like the, when I talk to people like older PIs, well, maybe not older PIs, because like a lot of tenured people just like are, I'm cool, I've done it. But like the people who are trying to push the field forward and are looking to get tenure or whatever they want, like the younger, the folks who have the power to really shape a research direction and where they want to go with it, like that's a particular arena, and the move, I don't want to say movers and shakers, but the movement and shaking happening in that space, I think there's a lot of parallels, and things that are not parallel at all. But I think there's a lot that I'm not saying in what I'm talking about, obviously, but now that I have a little bit of space from just this 2-week period of absolute, like, I couldn't go to last week's reading group meeting. I was exhausted. And then this week has just been so much more just stressful sorting things out and preparing folks for another round of like trying to deal with stuff. That's largely been what I've been up to for the last 2-3 weeks. Outside of that, thank you guys so much for joining the reading group. I have access to the group, to the one that I missed. I have not fully seen it, but it looks very promising from everything I've heard. I will read that to catch up for next time. I guess we might try to meet next week if folks want to. But I heard basically we're not meeting next Saturday, which I think is a reasonable choice.
I won't be free for cognition features next week.
Okay, that's fine. I'm expecting it basically to be me and potentially Bradley, and just like we might just review some stuff and think about things. Like, I don't.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I'll be in Michigan during that time with my parents. So I might, if I'm free that night, then I'll be there.
So we have someone going to Michigan, someone leaving Michigan.
Yeah.
Is that right? How about that? Also, Avery's in Michigan, so maybe.
What? Oh my God! Where? Kalamazoo. My parents are in Battle Creek. I'll be right there.
That's cool. I'll
And
talk
maybe
with that later.
Kalamazoo, Ann Arbor. I forget.
I'm in Ann Arbor, but I lived in Kalamazoo for a couple of years for grad school.
What was it? Yeah. Oh my God.
And next year I'll be in Detroit.
Ah, that's where I was born. Oh my God.
Next year for like.
Well, I guess shorter than a year.
For like
6 months.
some
In the city, like in the city of Detroit proper.
Yeah, my boyfriend is gonna be joining either a law firm or the UAW, but practicing law in Detroit.
Nice.
Awesome. Oh my God, you guys are gonna have such a ball. I love that city.
Detroit Rock City.
I'll have to talk to you about. We like don't have a place yet or anything, so I'll have to talk to you about neighborhoods and stuff.
I'll call some old friends because I haven't lived there in a long time. But
That's fun. I feel like this is a comment nobody's gonna get. I'm gonna say it for myself, as which is most of what I say. but the Michigan and like Ohio and that area are part of the country in college athletics is Big Ten conference. As probably, I think Amanda knows that at least. But
I used to be a janitor at Michigan Stadium.
Oh really? That's amazing.
I know firsthand. Giant tech.
And the big thing in college sports right now is name, image, likeness, which is like a way for players to get paid. And I'm thinking like between Bradley and Amanda and Avery and we have enough presence there. We need to infiltrate a Big Ten school and get name, image, likeness contracts for all of us, so we can get bonus funding on the side. And you can hear like, who wouldn't want us to be part of your like, oh, you're buying some. You need some open source consulting. Well, we have expertise here. We'll get paid thousands of dollars. We're not going to get paid any money,
no.
But it was a fun thought in my mind to go there, because I hear like I listen to Nebraska and there's one of the receivers names. His name was DeColdis Crawford, and they had an amazing. Hi, I'm DeColdis, and like. It's gonna be a cold winter. You gotta get your AC checked. It was so good, and it's like the things that are happening in this space are wild. But I digress massively. Back to topics at hand. Avery's a little bit not mobile right now, but I'll let them know because you know Avery, Amanda, and Brian. Sort of knows of Avery at least, and Avery's an integral part of what we do here. So outside of that, I have been working on. Oh, I don't know if I showed anybody here yet. Can I show it like this? Let's see. This is a bit work in progress. I have. Whoops! What just happened? Weird. I'm still connected to you guys, right?
Yeah.
You can hear me. Why
Yeah,
is this
still
not
you,
working?
Yep, it's great.
Oh, because I spelled it totally wrong. That's right. That makes sense. Great. I was concerned that my website was down, but I misspelled my own five-letter website. I did it wrong. So just to be, here we go. This should work.
There we go.
So I've updated this website a little bit. I haven't been quite sure how to talk about the internship program. I don't know if I should call it this or like. There's kind of two different programs at play. There's directly this Orel and the UAlbany one. There's one I'm doing with JoPro itself. So right now I'm just calling it internship program. And I put Brian's stuff up on here because I think that's a really cool thing to highlight. That the lab has.
You misspelled my name.
I spelled your name.
Just in the paragraph.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, an extra C, 3 C's. It's only a 2. It's not a mistake.
Cool. Oh boy. That's awesome. So I will change that. So as you can tell, this is a very rough draft. But this is up. And I mentioned this in part because I don't know what to, I'll put something here and I'm going to be, I might solicit some folks for feedback about it, or like, I know Brian's like, hey, would you like, I don't know, like an interview or just like some small thing where we can say, hey, how's your experience in this program? That you've made this whole tool within your own course. That's why I asked you the course, what's your course title name? And I haven't put it in here yet, and I'll obviously fix everything else. But just a little thing here for this, mostly because what I want to do is get that curse form out, which is get that curse form sounds kind of funny, but it's the UAlbany recruitment place, so you can say, hey, interns, come join us next year.
Yeah.
That I'm going to do that today. Everything's pretty much set for that. I just wanted to. I'm glad I got that feedback so I can change everybody's names. But that's the least developed website for some of the groups. But any like feedback about that, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
It's just jopro.org, and then you can see it up there. But I'll put this here just in case. Like if you want me to, Brian, like if you want links to anything, I don't think I put any links on that right now. But you want links, like I put links to the GitHub or the repo or whatever you want. That's your project. I just wanted to say like, hey, our internship program has worked with the UAlbany to do this. So whatever you want, please say, and we can put it on there.
For right now, let's keep it to screenshots.
Yeah, it's and that's as you just as everybody knows, that's the whole point of these JoPro things right now. These are just literally just portfolios. I don't think I have any links to here, and they don't. Something they may put links to, but like I'm just doing. This is a partially redacted. We can blur stuff if need be, but like if there's a cool conference logo and thing, great. And then like basically the abstract, that's it. That's what this is for. But it helps people get a sense of what the hell we've been up to.
Great.
But that's basically what this is going to be. I have to figure out what I want to put here, and that stuff. So that's what that is. Let's work on that front. I've done my own center grad school stuff. I made some choices about places I want to go and don't want to go. I feel good about some things I want to do. I think the upcoming year for me, this is a whole conversation and a teaser. A very abridged version is this next year, I'm really going to be focused on developing certain skills, mostly technical skills. Like I'm going to do some computer science and data science stuff because I think the best path for me is to get some essentially not necessarily masters, but like postgraduate skill level in like some of the technical arenas around this stuff. Because I need to be a little bit more versed in like machine learning stuff and computational neuroscience stuff or whatever if we go in that direction. And then I think like longer term, like PhD, I think I'm committed to a PhD path. It's just at my own pace. And I really don't think I'm going to be able to do, there'd be one or two that I still apply to, but I think this is not going to be a big PhD year for me. I think I'm going to be applying to a lot of master's programs this year. and I have some pretty good leads about it. Like there are a few programs I'm really excited for. I'm also I think it's time to continue the MITx data science and statistics micromasters, because they're a really good program, and it is academic oriented and not industry oriented, which is something that I think is important for me right now. More about that later. And I saw something about like the next round of Neuromatch Academy or Neuromatch Conference that are starting to be talked about too. A lot of things for next year. As always, I'm starting to look at like conferences. I'm going to have a huge opportunity to travel to conferences and mostly be funded to an extent for technology related stuff in the next 6 months. I really want to hit that. I really want to get out of the Northeast and go someplace warm for technology's sake. That's a little bit of a joke, but it's obviously kind of serious too. But like, I'm looking for places to go and things to do, because I feel like I have this. The last 3 months I've been bound. Like I've been basically babysitting. It's just babysitting in the sense of technology implementation, development, strategy, and whatever the hell else is going on. So now it's like, okay, we're getting past that stage and that's fun. The next thing we're basically an hour into it, so I don't know if Ankit's going to be here, but the next topic and the most immediate thing for us to focus on is Nick Wick, New York Celebration of Women in Computing. Let me just go here now. I think this is it. All right. Yeah. So it's basically a year from last time. What is this showing you? Is this showing
The
this
website.
page?
Yeah, it's the website.
That's so weird. It doesn't show. I can't look at it myself. Anyway, I trust it's visible-ish.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Okay. So the deadlines got pushed back. It's 5 days from now. Ankit has mentioned in Slack that let's talk about XYZ. Ankit got really kind of excited about the basically the topic of. I tried to tag in Rashab. Oh,
There he is.
hey, great! I have summoned you. Hey, Ankit. We were just getting to the point this topic, which is awesome. Our meetings start a bit earlier. I don't know if that affects where you are. We start a little bit. An hour ago, and it shifts depending. Like we're in daylight savings time here in the U.S., so it might not be as communicated. But no, we were just getting to talking about this. And I was just about to say, I know Ankit really wanted to talk about the, what's it called here? Like how art, like copying artists and basically copying work and having programmatically generated work. And I think that's a great topic, in part because, let me go back to, I'll go back to a certain website. If we go back to this, which is our set page, one of our first topics, well, at least collaborations with Valeria, I actually talked to Valeria again about this subject, and she had some things to say. So I do think that I don't know if she'll be able to like collaborate with us again, but I do think that being able to, I think having a component that's built around this topic of like, who, you know, when AI makes stuff, who gets the profit, who gets the right, who gets the responsibility? I think that's a great topic that we could talk about in our submission. I imagine I'm going to be submitting another research talk where it's like we basically do what we did last time. And so I kind of wanted to say, what are the topics? What are the subtopics? Because if you remember, this is a great way to show it. this is basically what we did last time down here. We could, and I could essentially see us having a follow up on, maybe it's a little bit bigger. Does this zoom in for you when I zoom in here?
Yeah, yeah.
I could basically see us having a follow up on all open source stuff with Bradley and/or obviously Brian's whole deal. I could see there being a well, whatever, I don't know, programmatically generated rights, whatever we want to call that, rights and responsibility for the artist or people, like that whole deal. There's news and discussion to be had as always, and then maybe one or two more topics. I think that'd be a great package. So I don't know what people are feeling about that, but someone just say
Yeah.
something.
I'd love to do something for NICWIC again, for sure. Especially a presentation on ethical regulators, maybe
I just
building
saw that. Yeah.
on my blog post, and also maybe tying in the sustainability open source ethics stuff. That'd be great.
Honestly, that sounds really good, and also like even like there can be overlap. Like if Bradley wants to do the big update and you chime in with that too, and then you want to just on this, I think that's very tenable and viable.
Yeah, I could do something on sustainable open source. We can update on that.
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
mostly interested in the regulators and Ashby's work and stuff, and tying that in. So I think, yeah, if you want to talk about open source.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is a good group to try to recruit people to do open source or to have some sort of tie into the ongoing projects that we have. So, yeah, I think that would be good. But yeah, I think, I might do something more, maybe like, how do you get into open source or something like that, but also with that sustainability component. Yeah.
I'm actually talking to Erin now.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if she'll be able to join today.
Yeah.
Did Ankit say something here? Data trust was good, I remember. Okay, yeah. Hey, Ankit, did you want to say anything about your ideas? I don't know if you can voice it or just text it. That's fine too. But like, what's your? I know you wrote some things down in the Notion. I'm gonna pull that up here. But I like what you wrote before. And also, I know Rashad expressed interest, but didn't elaborate. Can I? Yeah, I'll just pull up the Notion to reshare my stuff. But I've been getting weird, random, like old school Mario themes in my head, and I don't know what that's about. I have no idea where that's from. Got nobody to blame but myself, I guess. Okay. Here we go. This should work. So, Ankit wrote this before about LLM generative AI affect creative industries. LLMs used for human-in-the-loop assistance, and industries can promote and progress with the same. And sort of, it looks like an outline of cases where it fails miserably. I'll put this like this. Reproducing information, prompt-based stuff can bypass unintended effects. Oh, I forgot about this. This guy wrote some really cool about like AI colonialism and how this fits into sort of just stealing people's work or not. And that could be a whole subtopic too. That could be like this could be almost like a plenary discussion. I think that'd be a really cool thing to host in the talk too. Like what do we think about this? That might be a fun. I don't know. I'll see. I'll ask them. I think I have a lot of leeway with them about the kind of stuff we can put in there. So it'd be fun to talk about. But let's see also. So let's do it like this. This is going to be. I don't know what to call this right now.
Programmatically generated. Yes, content.
So that's so we have that's one topic. And we can go back to it. I think Ankit's saying stuff, but we had what was the one Bradley more like open source.
Well, I think it could probably the open source stuff could fit into this topic. I don't want to like have competing topics. I think.
Oh no, I was thinking more just like we'll have different segments.
Okay.
Like,
well, yeah. So like a sustainable open source sustainability maybe.
Okay.
And then this would be like more of a.
Doesn't be your name or anything. Just like
yeah. But it's like basically, and this would be more how to do this instead of like kind of talking about generalities, maybe getting people involved, a conduit to getting people involved. Amanda put a link in the chat. Have I been trained? Which is a AI art thing that.
Yeah, it seems like artists can search. They can like submit their images that they think might have been used to train AI. I don't know quite sure how it works, but interesting concept to see if your art has been
that is fascinating.
To train these AIs.
Yeah.
Hello, R7.
It's me. Can you hear me?
I thought it might be you. Yeah, hi, it's Erin. Hi.
Okay, yeah, hi.
Greetings. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
We were talking about that event. Whoops. Yeah, this is actually what we did last year. Whoops, sorry. I just lost it. But NICWIC 2021 New York Celebration of Women in Commuting. You don't have to participate in that. I just kind of bother you because hey, we're talking about everybody showed up here. We're thinking about what we might want to do next time at the same event. Here we go. So basically the same thing. Research talk, first time talk. I think I'm going to submit a big research talk for the lab, just like we did last time. And some of our topics we're thinking about are programmatically generated content, like creative industries being affected by AI generated stuff. Open source sustainability is basically following up on our Google Summer of Code work from last year, this year I guess, and then Brian's continuing to think about ethical regulator stuff. So we're what are people saying in the chat? I know there's been stuff here in the chat that I missed. And Amanda just mentioned this, have I been trained, which is about like kind of a thing to see. Can I just do it here? I guess it's something that can show, it's like to check for plagiarism. Like if try to see if it's been augmented or created. Have you used it much, Amanda? I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were saying something about it.
No, I haven't used it. I just searched test and it gave me some nonsense. So I'm not sure exactly how it works. But just regarding this question of if the question of like, is it theft? Well, I think that's really interesting. And I think it's at least important for people to know if like based off of what data or off of what art is their AI generated thing. Like what did it use? Because it's, I don't know, it links up to these more philosophical questions about creativity. But I think it's at least important to have like some kind of transparency. And if this tool works, then that's neat.
Okay.
I think like can you show the notion for a second?
Yep, here we go.
So I think the fourth point probably could be like, now since like you have the bad effects of generative AI, how are you going to like safeguard this from happening? So I think we could talk a lot about this have I been trained on this direction? Probably as the fourth point.
Oh, like in your layout here?
Yeah, that would be a good extension. Like, what can we create so as to safeguard like art or anything that's created by other people? Like what can we propose in the form of like benchmarks or like tools? Yeah, things like that, basically.
Very cool. That's good. So yeah, this is sort of one whole potential slice, and these other two here. There's so many other ones that I actually have written someplace else that I don't recall where they are. But I think these are very good right now. I'm gonna try to reach out to, I think Amaris. I think most of our interns have kind of well, you know what? I don't know. That's not really a fair thing for me to say, in that some of the interns may want to stick around and do more stuff with us next year. And I think we'll reach out to them, but something Bradley and I can probably like, hey, send them a hey, what's up message, just to see. I think email would work outside of Slack too, honestly, just because people have so many Slack-like devices right now.
Yeah.
Someone's messaging me. Sorry. But yeah, any other thoughts people have about that event, or things they would want to? 11 banner.
I do have one sort of
Yeah, please.
intense sense of mourning over the fact that they discovered that, and I knew this was like, I often think of cybersecurity in like from the approach of what would I do or how could I mess this up? And I thought when I was getting into open source last year, I was like, oh, this is so neat. And I thought, well, this is really dangerous. Like, this is exactly how I would try and infiltrate someone's systems if I, was trying to spread something like, oh, it's for use by everybody. You just poison the local common grounds and then everybody takes it. Well, I guess repositories for open source have been, I think it was 144,000 different packages have been dropped in those. It's just heartbreaking. It's not where we need to be going. We should be going toward safeguarding the open source area. It's just frustrating for the future,
Did I, is this actually here? Like I think I put the.
I think I sent it to you a few days ago when I was really upset.
You did, and I meant to put it in the Slack channel for it or not. I don't know if I did, but I know what you were. It was like this. It was thinking about how what you just said. There's an article about it, so I think that could fit. That fits. That's everything we could have there. Either like its own thing or kind of underneath the open source. Well, either I don't know which would fit better under ethical regulators or just open source sustainability in general. Maybe the latter, but I think that's a valid thing to have there for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you want to, would you be interested in kind of reprising your role from last time, Erin, or you want to just like?
Interested, I'd be delighted. The only problem is I'm not sure if I can afford it time-wise now. I just convinced myself to sneak in here to this meeting. I haven't gone to sleep yet.
I mean, I don't think, I think it would be.
I think it'd be super fun. It'd be good for me. So I'll try, but no promises.
Yeah.
There's no, you have to commit 20 hours a week to it. So don't worry about that part of it.
Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Also like, just, I know this changes sometimes. If when I'm submitting a proposal, I put authors on it, would you want me to just not mention you on it? Because I know you're particular about.
Just a heads up, like you're currently recording this conversation. It's going to be on YouTube later, so maybe that's for a private conversation.
Yeah.
I know, but like,
okay, well maybe we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we can talk about her offline.
I'm not going to get into the details of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this idea is actually one of the first conversations we had about the open source sustainability. So that would be a good thing to talk about, in a forum, discussion forum, some of these issues.
It's just so useful. Like it would so much help us get to our Star Trek future,
Yeah.
Okay. Any other things on the table for this? I think the general plan is going to be submitting a research talk and then kind of going from there. Because I think the format that we have was actually really cool, and I think it went well last time. And I'll talk to the organizers about what they see about that. 20 minutes is not a whole lot of time. That's maybe I don't know. With what we just have now, that could easily be 20 minutes. We could fill 40 minutes with what we have right now. But yeah, I think that's the plan. So I'll put some drafts in the Slack about the abstract and to get it sent out by. This is actually. Did they update this? Oh, they did update it here. Okay, cool. So yeah, that'll be the next few days. We'll do that. And I may talk to yeah, like I said, actually maybe talking to one of my original collaborators on NICWIC, who's a law student and now I guess practicing. I don't know if they're a full attorney now or not, but I'd be curious to hear about their take on this too. And then if I can invite them to work with us, that'd be great. But yeah, if you have any other ideas that come to you, please reach out to me in the next few days so we can put that in the abstract and go from there. In general, we have a decent amount of leeway. So that's what time is it now? Okay, great. It's about 20 minutes into this hour, so I'll probably leave it at that. Anything else you wanted to? There be a few other updates I want to say, I think, Bradley, but let me think about them and I'll give you.
Yeah.
Give the mic to you for the time being. But what's on your mind for where you want to do the rest of the meeting?
Well, I was going to have Brian give his presentation since we have more people here now, and then I can talk about some things too. So.
Okay, let's do that then.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask before we move on to the next topic?
Okay, go ahead.
So a question that I definitely wanted to ask was I think the deadline is on December 22nd, as far as I remember, for submitting the abstract. Yep. So who's working on what topic with respect to that in New York Women Computing Day? Because I might be busy for a few days, so I might have one spare day to write.
Yeah, just to reiterate, the topic is you can I'll be putting a draft topic in the Notion space probably, and you can edit it if you want. The average is going to be a couple sentences, so we're not going to have you're not going to do a full presentation in 4 days. That's what I'm concerned about.
For now, just put a short description, and I would just write it up, and then if people want to look it over, make sure it's reasonable, then that would be.
If you want to put a couple sentences down of your own, how you're envisioning what you want, the part that you want to say, Ankit, please write it, absolutely write it out anywhere. It can be in Slack or Notion, doesn't matter. Put your thoughts into it, and we can incorporate it into the abstract.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was a little bit confused. So are we submitting a combined a talk from the lab, or are we separating different talks?
Well, as what we've largely done in this particular event is a combined. I'll show this again. Basically, we have a research talk. We're basically getting a 20 to 25 minute chunk of time, and in that time we can have these different subtopic presentations, and that's what we've done for the last 3 years.
That'd
for
be
them.
like a 5-minute talk each.
Okay, that seems
Yeah.
doable.
It's sort of
We
like
just
a thematic combination of flash talks in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just think that we just need to make sure that like one topic kind of flows into the another, like because the first topic that we kind of agreed upon was like AI and like generative AI. The second topic is open source sustainability, and then the third topic that we're probably discussing on was the cyber security aspect. So we need to find some like common links between, you know.
Yeah, and like some of that like actual design work we don't really have to do right now. It's literally just an abstract. So like we can incorporate that into writing the abstract, but like you don't have to worry about, at least for the next 4, if we get accepted, that will be largely what we do. Like how do we make it flow and work and seem nice? But like that can be kind of after. So yes, that's
So right now the abstract would be like a combined abstract.
Yeah.
For the whole, we're submitting for a research talk or like a 20-minute. They call it a research talk, and for us it'll kind of be almost like a mini symposium, or like basically the discussion group we had at CogSci 2021. Whereas like you just get a chunk of time, and it's like, all right, you can have this chunk of time for presentations or discussion that you host, and then we'll have a little bit of time for question and answer, and yeah. So I think the best way to think about it is like a series of flash talks. Like last year we literally had a series of flash talks. We had this person speak about this topic. Great, they did one of them. Some like Angela's talk was recorded. We had someone call in on the phone. We had someone do it live. We had someone do like a hybrid version of it. So we had these like different segments. So it's kind of like, in effect, it's essentially creating I guess like a mini symposium where we just have different speakers and we go through them. It's nice to have them overlap, but it can be fairly discrete chunks of presentation.
It's kind of like OREL at NYWIC.
Kind of what now?
Like OREL at NYWIC kind of stuff. No.
I didn't quite understand what that was.
I mean like a bit like, you know how the other labs do like Stanford at ICML or like CMU at HCI 2022. It's a bit like that, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a lab. Our whole lab is submitting something kind of. So. But we can talk more about the.
Okay, so I'll write a few things down, definitely, whatever I have in mind.
Yeah, please do that.
And then maybe I think you or Bradley, maybe you'll be a lot better at consolidating into like a few lines for the abstract.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would write whatever you have in mind, even if it's more than that. Like write as much of an abstract as you want, and then we can then write like a condensed 2 or 3 sentences about specifically what you want to contribute.
Yeah, I'll write as much as whatever like ideas are coming to mind. Then you can like take it and like hash it down to something.
We'll synthesize it into the final submission that we put out to the lab, from the lab to the event. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Great.
By the way, did you come across this forward algorithm by Geoffrey Hinton?
I think so.
Do you want me to share it? Or is there any other topic like you want to discuss?
I know we wanted to get into Brian's presentation while we still have time. So.
Okay, I'll just share it. Maybe we can discuss it the next time.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That sounds better.
And maybe time after Brian's thing too. I just don't know how long this.
Yeah.
I think it's better if we discuss it the next time around.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, that's good. I'll just share it.
Yeah, you could share it in the Slack too. I mean, it's okay, Brian. You wanna?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. And I'm looking forward to hearing about the forward algorithm because I don't know what it is. So please share that in the Slack. That sounds great. So I'm just going to share with everybody where we're at right now with the Sustainability Auditing Tool, which is our kind of silly name for this project that has become a, thank you, 2 steps forward, algorithm, no steps back. That's cool. AGI is almost here. Yeah, sure, whatever. I never believe that anytime anyone ever says it, sorry. However, so here we go. I like that idea of non-commutative algorithms, like moving forward and not being able to go back. That's really nice. And sorry, I'm not going to read the chat because I'm going to try to get this presentation quickly. Okay, so Sustainability Auditing Tool. Many of you have seen this several times. This is GUI designed by an Albany student, and you know, it's kind of nice. It's not really ORL style, but it's pretty good. But we can continue to work on it now that we've taken it out of the Albany context. I think there's a lot of stuff that we can do. So the basic functionality of it is that I'm already signed into GitHub, so it gives me access to the organizations that I've already have access to, and I would select those organizations, and then at the moment, this is an oversimplification, the whole thing, but you would be able to then select a repo from within that organization or the organization itself. And then it would input, then in this case, the number of people in the organization to populate the models. And it would also populate the information about the specific repo that you chose into the NetLogo code here. And then you would be able to run a model that would correspond directly to the reality of your open source development situation. And then you would just basically be able to run these models, compare them side by side. Yeah, let's see how they go. And these are just 2 super simple models to start with. There's a lot of ways to move forward. And that's really, I think, what this presentation is mostly about for me. That's what I'm most excited about. Can you all see this mouse pad thing here?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. So these are my questions. Funding. Where do we get that? What is money anyway? And do we even need it? That's a question. Presentations. Nick Wick would be cool. And Bradley, you were saying something at the beginning of the meeting about giving a presentation, writing a paper, giving another presentation as a way to kind of develop ideas.
Yeah.
I think that this project needs something like that. I think we've reached a point now where functionally it's okay. But really what it needs now is feedback from people who would actually use it.
Right.
So I'd love to talk to Morgan. I'd love to talk to anybody else that I know has sustainability and open source opinions and experience. So I'd love to start writing a paper. I've already got a lot of writing out about it, including like this giant final report that I made for this capstone class that goes into the specific implementation of this problem, different other people who've tried to solve it, like Yoshi and Augur and SourceCred, and how our project is different than those, and all these, yeah, thank you, yeah, all these models, control flow models and data models and all this stuff. So there's a lot of writing already out there. So it'd be pretty easy for me at least to start to put together a paper. And then the question becomes where to release it. I think the models themselves need a lot of work. And so I'd love to kind of hold a workshop with people who would be interested just to see what's useful about this, what is it missing. I think at the moment I'm the maintainer, so I'm not going to ask about that. I want to add some new features, which is more complex GitHub data gathering, create a Python extension for NetLogo Web so that this is a Flask app. So it's powered basically by Python underneath. And a lot of the more interesting models that we're not able to use here, that were developed as part of GSOC, involve Python very heavily. So NetLogo Web itself doesn't actually have the ability to run Python code. So even though it has this fantastic thing, if you have any Python extensions up here, it's not going to run properly. So I'd love to in the model of open source, build that out kind of for the community. So that's a pipe dream, but that's one that I think needs to happen and would be really cool. Another thing that Bradley brought up is, in addition to this more complex GitHub data gathering, maybe a place to enter alternative data. So maybe that would involve complicating these models a bit and being able to zoom in on each individual person, for example, and maybe add pertinent data about them, like, well, it's important that they contributed a lot of research articles in the Slack, or we had this really good meeting, and so that would move them around in this contribution location in an interesting way. And then also, while I was working on this project, I got really interested in models of dynamical systems, and the ways that you can use kind of systems theory to construct these models or to alter these models graphically rather than using code. So that's something I've really been wanting to fold in here. And so you were down here flipping out. There were multiple Amandas, and it was crazy. Just sounded like
Wow.
It was amazing.
Like matrix programmatically generated reality right here.
Yeah, right. It's too bad Amanda isn't with us, but I understand. So these 3 questions here at the end with regard to this project. Is it a product? And maybe should it be? Like, in my mind, probably no. But what are the horizons of simulation itself? And especially with regard to this project, like how far, or just what does this mean? And then how important is reality to our construction of reality? So how important is accuracy to getting this working in a way that's helpful
Right.
for the people who want to use it?
Yeah. So I guess we could start on the top. So moving forward, funding, I don't know. We'll have to figure out if we can find some funding. So what I showed you at the beginning of the meeting was the DevoWorm platform, and we haven't really gotten funding for that. But there are going to be opportunities maybe to fund it, especially as it's built out. So if we get contributors, if we get maintainers, if we can put out a release and say, this is something that is, has a user base, something that has some utility to people, then we can start to say, like, this is something that people want to use, people are using, and we can fund it. Like, it's hard to find, sometimes you can find funding for open source projects. There's an organization called NumFocus, which gives small grants to open source projects. There are other types of funding opportunities, largely for, maintaining things, developing things. Then there's like Google Summer of Code. So there are all these, and they're usually small amounts, but they usually help you to get to that next step. I would definitely encourage the presentations paper cycle, like we talked about. I think the presentations are, key to sort of getting the word out about it, getting good words. And then the paper, like a preprint, or I think an archive paper, or maybe a technical paper would be useful here. We did a technical paper on the DevoWorm stuff. I don't have it up, but it's in that repository that I was showing you, the DevoWorm repository. So Jesse's putting comments in here. Soliciting feedback from open source users, but that requires you to have a user base. What would be useful parameters? I guess it would depend on, once people start using it, what they find to be lacking or whatever. And this is just, we kind of guessed on the parameters for what we were doing before. So we had we kind of came up with parameters that we thought were interesting and useful, and they may not be what people, they probably will be what people want, but people want more than that. And so this will be something when people use it, they'll kind of know what they want to look at, and they'll suggest things. And this is a part of open source development, is where you have suggestions from the community as to what to add, what features to add. So usually, you'll solicit maybe suggestions. You'll have events where you ask people, what would you like to see? Sometimes they'll open an issue on the GitHub and say, this issue, this capability needs to be added. And then you can move from there. You can create an issue saying we're going to add this feature. Or maybe it isn't something that we really want to do right now, but we'll do it maybe at some point. So there are different ways to do that. There's a whole practice of that in open source communities. So that's good. New features again. I like the GitHub login. I like being able to do things in GitHub. Being able to fork this project, and I think including different models and constantly updating those models is good. Offering people different models, but also, like I mentioned on Monday when we did the check-in, I like the idea of being able to let people add in their own type of data. So if you're drawing from GitHub, that's good. That's a good way to do it if you're just want to get a quick assessment. And many people will be interested in that. But to also add another data into the mix is also useful. I'm not really, I haven't really dug into all of our models to know exactly what's being imported and whatnot. But I think having if you're going to, especially if you do the model comparisons, to be able to manage that whole process, that's going to be an end goal, and that won't be something you can put in right away. That'll be something where people can do.
Right, but that is something I think that once we start doing these workshops and asking for feedback and maybe developing a community around it more, those answers will start to just appear. I mean, that's been my experience with this kind of work. It's like you start asking questions and suddenly, oh yeah, maybe I had a great meeting with Jesse on Slack yesterday, and I want to put that in the considerations for how our software development is going. So there needs to be a way to kind of fold that in, and I think that'll be different for every model. So it's just a lot to consider, but it's also exciting.
Yeah. And then, is it a product? Well, I mean, I don't think right now it's going to be a product. I think it's going to be an open source platform, and then people will use it. And then eventually you'll get people who want more. Usually the way that they do this in open source or in different platforms in general is to have a freemium version or something where you offer a basic service, and then people want to do more. If they want better features, you might charge for that at some point. That's it's kind of open source is, a lot of times there's a debate on how open to make it. So we want to make this really, radically open, which I like. Yeah. Or do we want to just OpenAI is not necessarily radically open. They have their own sort of pay versions of things, but this is something where you take what you have what's available in open source, the code and everything, and you bundle it in certain ways. So you can have proprietary features that you add in, or you could say, this is something that we offer as a service. Building on the open source. So that's I guess what the product is that, because you're building an open source platform. It's not really it's not necessarily useful to think of that as the product. It's useful to think of that as the thing that you're building on. The product is maybe something that you're offering as a service, or there could be other things. I've worked on this to some extent with different projects. It's tough to make the call as to what people will pay for.
Yeah, and for me, I was asking this question mostly because in my mind, the product question is something to avoid because it just gets in the way of this kind of work.
Yeah.
In my experience, but that's why I was like, okay, but let's ask it right away then, just to
Yeah.
get it, to make sure that we're like, oh, we're all on the same page, right? We can just kind of put this part of it aside. This is not the interesting part. Come back to that maybe, if it works at all and people find it useful, which I'm still very dubious about. I have to get over that.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to think of any contemporary high-profile examples of a product or software that has been ruined massively by efforts to make it into a more viable, profitable enterprise.
Slack, Twitter, everything, Facebook, Tesla, mostly Elon Musk stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything. Government, I would dare say.
That's
Well,
pretty good. That's not a bad alley oop there.
I mean,
Yes.
I guess the issue is like, what are, like, you're spending time developing it. What are people willing to pay for? And if
Right,
you're just
yeah.
developing something for people to buy, but no one buys it, then what's the point?
Right, then what's the point?
Yeah.
But if you're developing something that can help people, or can help people think more deeply about their communities, or like, and I'm excited to explore this in the papers, or just to explore the nature of simulation and how it relates to reality and how computation corresponds to reality and how people think about that. I think that if we're open from the beginning, saying this is all, like this is all simulation, so
Right.
it's as helpful as you need it to be, it's not an accurate reflection of reality, then maybe people will find it useful. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I think definitely people will find. I like this going into this direction where you're saying when we answer some really fundamental questions about things with this, and I think maybe, I mean, I think simulation, we could answer some questions about that, and it doesn't necessarily matter, it you can cleave that from like the software development and say, or not, you could have people who say, okay, I'm interested in this fundamental question, and then let's make some software that will test this out, and we can have an open source development aspect to it where we can iterate on it and build use our research questions to guide the development. And in a lot of physics, open source, that's what they do. Like they're answering fundamental questions about the universe, origins of the universe, but they also have this open source software they're maintaining. So they're doing this stuff with, they're trying to answer questions, but they're also developing the tools. And some of that came out of necessity because those tools didn't exist when they started.
Right.
So it's like, and then I think with this stuff too, the software doesn't exist, or we're building the software. But when you're answering the questions, there's no other way to answer them than to have to build the software and build that out.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I love that.
I have a comment that ties this to what I said earlier in the meeting, and it basically is just Bradley said it probably better than me, and it just is But what I would add to it is revisiting the product question. I was basically going to get to what Bradley said about, I think there's sort of a basic research component to what we're doing that's like fundamental. This is like, well, what you're doing, I suppose. Like this is good. Like this is important stuff. If a potential way to think about it in a product sense, I think there's sort of, in the context of what I said at the start of things, and granted it's a different setting, but at the start of the meeting, I think the immediate question for a viable product right now is, what is the demand for similar tools for this? And I have no idea what that is. Who is using them? Is it big companies? Is it like smaller user bases? Like what's the variation? What's that market demand for as it exists now? And then if you choose to go into a product or in the sense of, I want to create a device that in a long-term sense shifts some of the tectonic plates down the road, like if you really want to go that way, like in the 2, 3, 4, 5 year timeline of things, then you can start tailoring some of the basic research to being, okay, people will eventually shift towards using my product or what we're doing here. The fundamental research can lend to this new point of interface for a lot of more broad stuff down the road. So that's maybe not really the most concrete answer, but I feel like if there's going to be heavily product focused in that sense. And I think a great question, and this is mostly for myself, and maybe not a question you have, or at least a fun way for me to think about this is, should it be a product or not? But also, how much do I want, or do we want, what is being created to become a major point of interface for other stuff, which is essentially the same as a product, because that's what a product would have to be on some level, or at least this is more of this is something that people would have to, and that's I think that's one thing I don't quite know how to think about with what we have so far, which is what we have so far something people like you know how like Spotify had the wrapped up season thing, or like those end of the year show us all of your data, we'll create this cool visualization output. Like what you is there like a one time you give us your data, we produce this stuff, and then we have an output? Like do we want to have it be this way, or do we want it to be, no, we have our basic research, we have this tool, but we have this community where things are being built on, and we have kind of like Obsidian, like we have this sense of people are having they can add on their own components, they get on their special filters, they get on their special simulations, they can add on to it, where it's like it becomes a hub for other activity to happen. And I think I don't know enough about the project to really understand where that vision is or wants to go.
Yeah. Now, your paper that you wrote, I think that's very valuable. So you wrote a big report. So that'll be something we can just use as like the basis for like a technical paper.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
But there's a lot of...
Yeah, and in fact, I have a better, so I have a couple reports that I've written for this project. And the most interesting one was actually for my Bayesian data analysis class. Let me see if I have that. Because this one gets into the actual nitty gritty of things. Yeah. So here we actually talk about the cooperation model and the exact equations that were used to make it, and how Marwell and Oliver's production function for collective good becomes a utility function for Glantz and Huberman, and then I try to fold in the regulator. And so yeah, there's a lot of source material that's already there, so I can maybe start centralizing that stuff. And just really quick, Jesse, first of all, thank you. That was a very, very helpful meditation on product. And I kind of set up this like this public dichotomy. It's not really a dichotomy, it's more of like a dilemma, really. Like between like, do we wrap up your open source sustainability, like give you like a score or something? That sounds gross, but maybe actually it's a good way to get started. And then as a hub for other activity, I think this could be interesting, especially if for GSOC we do more models, we get more students to make more models and improve existing models and kind of keep going in this direction. I think that could be so exciting. Something that came up while we were just talking that I wanted to make sure I said before I forgot is, so I've always loved DevoWorm, and I've stopped from being involved just because I've been involved in, getting
Everything
a degree
else,
and
yeah.
just haven't had time. But my first research project I was ever part of was called the Genre Evolution Project, where we tried to track science fiction from its beginning and categorize every single aspect of it in terms of complex systems and put that all into a database and basically be able to track how the genre itself evolved, because we can trace science fiction from its beginning, and we can't do that from any other genre. We can say like, okay, Jules Verne, like right around here. And anyway, so that was a really interesting research group. And I see a lot of parallels between that and DevoWorm, starting with C. elegans and just saying like, we are only focusing on this. If we can like kind of get our brains around this closed system, this like very specific example, then we can move forward in other ways.
Yeah.
And I think this project has the potential to do that as well, and that's why I tried to approach it from this idea of contribution location, looking at software development communities as being evidenced in their software. So just by looking at the software, and I want to put more natural language processing into the models, you can actually get all the information you need just from the software itself, and looking at the version source control as kind of where things are coming from, using things like source cred to get involved in interpersonal dynamics and stuff. Anyway, that's where I'm excited to head. And I think the paper that I'm going to start writing soon is probably going to be about that.
Well, good. Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks for that update. That I know we had a long way to get here, but technical issues. Yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy.
But yeah, I don't know. So yeah, why don't I do the things I was going to do with yeah, thank you. So yeah, we'll talk about more of that in the new year. I think it's definitely good to get that off the ground and moving forward. And I know that I talked to Hussein the other day, and he's interested in continuing with this as well. So
Oh, good.
doing more, working on more models and other things. So let me share my screen. So a couple things. I had a couple readings that I wanted to go over with people. Also, I wanted to make a call for a class that I'm going to be working on this spring, and it's going to be like a dual enrollment, or as it'll be, it's a physical class at the University of Illinois, but it'll also be a thing that people can participate in on our end, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah. So first of all, Jesse. Well, yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. First of all, Jesse asked about Mastodon and this whole madness of King Elon. People are moving to Mastodon, and we have like our Twitter feed and this, but we also now have a Mastodon feed at Neuromatch Social. So Neuromatch is started a Mastodon instance, and they have people from the Neuromatch community there. And I'm actually, my personal Mastodon account is on sigmoid.social, which is actually hosted by the Gradient. So that they have their own instance, and Neuromatch has its own instance.
I think I need to. So I really quick. I'm a big. I feel like I'm very underinformed about how to use Mastodon. So let me just ask some really basic questions.
Okay.
I have had a Mastodon account before, but it's not one that was a public. It was for a different thing, and it wasn't a public account. I think I need to basically make a new personal account. I was actually going to use Sigmoid as potentially a base if they're letting people come in now. I don't know if they are, because I know Judy Fan, who I'm kind of a fan of. Let's just bypass that pun right now. And I like, where should I make a home account? Because from what I understand, like you say, you can log into other servers with an existing account somewhere, but I don't know how that really works yet. So what would you advise an interested young researcher who wants to get into Mastodon? What would you say to them? That being me mostly, but in general, like what I have no idea what I should do to join this stuff.
All right. So the way Mastodon works is it's a distributed system. Yeah. So you have individual servers, instances, like you have Neuromatch, you have Sigmoid, and I would stick maybe with those two for now. There are others that are out there, but
I'm trying to wrap my head around them all.
But basically, it's just a home base. So you create an account on a home server, and then you can. So this is our profile. This is on Neuromatch Social. There's a local feed, which is everyone in the Neuromatch Social area. Now this is someone from Neuromatch, but this is being boosted, as they call it. So they have boosted and retweets. This is like I don't know how the terminology. It sounds kind of like movies from the Kevin Smith universe, like where they have it's like a made up fast food restaurant, but this is reality. So this is our they have toots, they have boosts, they have all these things. But anyways, it works like Twitter. It's just they use different terminology. But anyways, Mastodon is another local server that you can join. That's for mathematicians. That's Albert Cardona. And you have people like, other people from Neuromatch here who are boosting things from other non-Neuromatch domains, moss.to. And so that's the local feed. It's just anyone in Neuromatch who's boosting things from other places or from their own place. This is Lise Pessoa, who's actually, I think, on Neuromatch. Yeah, Neuromatch Social. So this is your local feed. This is from this instance. Users of this instance will put stuff up. And then there's this home, which is actually the federated feed. So it's not, I can't really show you right now because this account isn't following people from all over. But what happens is if you're here in this instance, you can follow people, or you can actually search for people from other instances. So you can actually explore. It's not working well, but you can search for different people. I don't know how to do this. You can, yeah, okay, here you can search up here. I use the mobile, that's why I'm not really familiar with this, but you can search for different users, and you can actually add them in as you can follow them, but you can follow them across instances. So I can follow someone from Sigmoid Social. So I'm going to look myself up as an example. And there I am from Sigmoid Social. And I'm actually not following myself on this, but I will. So now I'm looking myself up at Sigmoid Social. I'm on Neuromatch, and I can go and I can follow that person, and then I can get whatever they boost. So basically, you have a federated feed, which is this home feed. You have the local feed, which is this feed, and then you can search for people and follow them from other instances. And so it's basically a distributed. It's different than Twitter because Twitter is everything altogether. There are no different instances. And then you say, well, why do I need to have a specific instance? And the answer is because there's this local community aspect. You can do a local feed, and then you can do a federated feed, and then they call it the Fediverse. So it's like all these different instances where you can go across them, and it's not fluid, but it's fluid enough, I guess.
So I guess my direct question is, where should I make my base account, and how much does it really matter?
It doesn't matter too much. I mean, it just depends on where you want to be located. If you want, just maybe it's a prestige handle like Neuromatch or, Sigmoid. Maybe it's like you have friends there. It doesn't really matter though. At the end of the day,
There's like Fedi Science too, like Johan.
Fedi Science is another one. Yeah, if you want, you can find out how to join that.
It's funny, I just made a new account for myself because I was on Fostodon when I first started. But now I put this link in the chat, Jesse. If you go to that link, you can sign up for a Neuromatch Social, and they just approved me just now. It took like less than 5 minutes. And so now I'm on Neuromatch Social as me, which is great.
It's about 2.2 seconds. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. This is helpful. Thank you.
Okay. So I just wanted people to know about that we're on Mastodon now. I don't know what we'll do with the space, but
cool. And also, honestly, I think the lab being associated with Neuromatch in this way is clutch.
Yeah.
It's great.
it'll be nice to have that tie-in,
It's totally. Hey, I just wanted to ask really quick, is GSOC still only for students?
No, actually, this past year it was for students and non-students. So it used to be very tightly constrained around being a student, but now it's open a little bit more. And I don't know, we're making an application as an organization this year again. More about that in the new year, but we'll be admitting people potentially who aren't students. So it's pretty open.
If you want me to be involved at all in that, I'm happy to. I'm very excited about continuing the project, and I can't think of a better way to do it than GSOC right now. I
think in your case, we might want to promote you to sort of like a mentor or a co-mentor, and that would help because you have institutional knowledge now. So
you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd love to be in that position because then I'd love to kind of using the DevoLearn GitHub as a template, kind of start to give that same treatment to this project. I think it could really use it.
Yeah, it would be. So that's all I wanted to talk about with Mastodon, and we'll talk more about GSOC in the new year as we move forward on that. Another thing I wanted to talk about is this paper on the Nautilus, what the tiny cluster of brain cells in my lab are telling me. So this is actually a nice article that Morgan posted in the Slack. It's actually on organoids and someone who works with organoids and who's kind of reflecting on what it says about how the brain works. So we've talked about organoids in the group before, about their usefulness for looking at tissue development and some of the things about some brain function stuff for like neurodegeneration or computational psychiatry or whatever. But this is actually reflecting, and this isn't something you usually find in the articles, because the articles on organoids are usually very technical, and they kind of go over the protocols and some of the experiments that they've done. But this is a nice article talking about organoids and how they might. So this was I was in a planning meeting for a class designed to link neuroscience and the humanities. My colleagues, professors in the art and music departments, were puzzled and curious about the enthusiasm written on my face. Wanting to keep the discussion grounded in science, not science fiction, I began to explain, was there a fragment of consciousness in the tissue speck, a whisper from the genes of the donor? The tissue blob was called a brain organoid, and this was from the biopsy of the skin of a donor. So generally the way you start cell lines or organoids is you get like a biopsy of some type, and you get basically a tissue sample, and you plate it in a culture dish. My doctoral advisor actually had some oral surgery once, and he had the dentist save the tissue, and then he made a cell line that we used to reprogram into induced pluripotent cells. So it's not like you can just make these cell lines. I've actually made a cell line from tissues of my own too. You have to isolate the cells. You basically take the tissue, you put it in a plate, you put it in culture media with a lot of antibacterial agent, and then the tissue kind of dies off and cells crawl out of the tissue. They migrate out and they migrate onto the plate, and you have to passage them or change the media a number of times, and whatever survives then is your cell line. So it's like really, it's an involved process, but you can get cells out of different tissues that way. So it's really interesting how you can do this. I guess you can do it in a DIY fashion, but you need to have the equipment. But anyways, so my postdocs and I gently prodded the cells to become brain cells by providing the necessary chemical growth conditions that guide them to a neuronal fate. We injected a drop of these cells inside a gel-like matrix so they could grow into a three-dimensional shape, rather than growing conventionally on a flat surface like characters in Flatland, which is a book that ponders like what life would be like in a two-dimensional world. And this is like a cell culture where you just plate cells on a dish like this, and it's basically a monolayer. So it's a layer of cells, a single layer of cells that can migrate in one direction, but they sometimes form, they migrate over the top, but it's really the difference here is between like a flat surface that the cells adhere to and a three-dimensional gel where they can migrate, a considerable distance up and down. And this has an effect on what they look like. These are dendrites, which can migrate up and down a column as well as from side to side, and they form these structures. In the cerebellum, there's a very intricate structure of layers and of connections across not only side to side, but up and down as well. And that has a lot of functional significance. So it's very important to have the three-dimensional aspect. So the humanities colleagues are fascinated by this. Was there a fragment of consciousness locked inside the tissue speck? A whisper from the genes of the donor. I momentarily ignored such fantastical misconceptions. My project was motivated by the brain as unknown territory, and the unknown as an allure that lies deeply within human nature. So they're working on organoids as like this thing that unlocks secrets of the brain. And, the humanities people are asking about like, what is the bigger significance of this? And so this is an interesting dialogue. This is kind of, now they're getting into Alice in Wonderland and thinking about some of the aspects of what's going on with these developing neural systems and how they're becoming kind of like brains, and if they function more like brains. And it's not necessarily something you just get from your measures. Sometimes you have to think outside the box to understand what you're actually doing. So you can use mathematical tools to understand like a electrophysiological signal, whether it's, you know, what the content of that is. So you can use a Fourier transform, for example, to convert the waves that you get from electrophysiological measures like, you know, single cell electrophysiology to some set of frequencies that you can actually understand what those cells are doing. So this is a nice article. It's, you know, if you want to read through it more, it's in the Slack. I think it's in the Brain Organoids channel. So that's something you can check out. This other article is from Wiring the Brain, which is a blog. And it's by Kevin Mitchell, who's very active on Twitter and probably on Mastodon as well. He's done a lot of stuff with development and the brain. He's got some really interesting ideas. But anyways, so this is an article about how many neurons does it take to change a light bulb? And it's really a question. So I've been reading this excellent paper by David Barak and John Krakauer on 2 views on the cognitive brain, which is this article here from Nature Reviews Neuroscience. And this is about cognition can be defined as computational or meaningful representations in the brain to produce adaptive behavior. There are 2 views on the relationship between cognition and the brain that are implicit in the literature. There's the Sherringtonian view, which is sort of this neurophysiological view, which is that cognition is the result of operations on signals performed at nodes in a network, and then they form circuits. That contrasting Hopfieldian view is that cognition is the result of transformations between or movement within representational spaces. So basically, it's this neurophysiological view, and then the Sherringtonian view, which is, or the Hopfieldian view, which is more about representation. So this is the Sherringtonian view is not really about representation. I guess you could say it's more embodiment, but it's not really that. It's more neurophysiological. It's like if you have a reflex, if I hit your knee with a hammer and your knee jumps up, and then what happens in that circuit between your knee and your central nervous system? What's the activity of that circuit? So it's what they call a simple reflex circuit. And so this is an interesting point because we talk about, say, in AI, a lot about Hopfieldian thinking. Like we have these representations, we have these neural networks, which are, supposed to be representation free. And then we have representational spaces that the brain uses as well. Versus the Sherringtonian view, which is very much neurophysiology, where you have these circuits that are basically active in a certain way, in an excitatory or inhibitory way. So this is, in the motor system with motor neurons and everything. So there's, they have these, the Sherringtonian view involves node-to-node connections, activation or transfer functions at nodes, representations necessarily carried by individual neurons. The Hopfieldian view is that we have representational spaces and movement through or transformations between those spaces. So I guess in this sense, you could use you gotta have a computational view for either of these. This is just that there are 2 different ways of viewing this. So this article kind of talks about some of these the difference between these 2 views. There's a different question that occurred to Kevin in thinking about these 2 modes of function. Which one arose first in evolution? So in other words, did we get reflexes first, or did we get these representations first? In creatures with very simple nervous systems, do the neurons work in little Sherringtonian circuits, or do neurons in fact arise as distributed Hopfieldian networks? So these representational spaces, like I talked about neural networks before, that's really another way of saying that they're distributed representations, that you have a bunch of cells that are in these layers and they're operating in parallel. So this is an interesting question about evolution. That's wondering what animal has the fewest neurons. So C. elegans is known as having 302 neurons, but there are actually other organisms with even fewer neurons. And they're there are connectomes of like 50 or 60 neurons. So this polychaete species, this annelid, which is a worm, it's what they call a polychaete. Dinophilis gerontocilus has 68 neural cells. So this is actually, it's concentrated in its brain and its penis. So it's basically a reproductive machine. And like, C. elegans is basically a reproductive machine too, with some behavior. So when you have a set of neurons, you don't do a lot. You just move around, you reproduce, you eat some bacteria or something, and that's it. So this is interesting how we can look at these very small connectomes and ask some of these sort of fundamental questions about what's the fundamental aspect of what the brain is for. The sponges are another example of what they call a nervous net, which is a chemical communication system or a communication system between neurons where there's no central nervous system. They can rely on things like traveling waves and things like that. What neurons do is give you a more specific way to coordinate the contractions of these sheets of cells. So you get these nervous nets that have sort of evolved into a centralized system. There's a hypothesis for the early evolution of nervous systems called the skin-brain thesis, which is that neurons emerge as a specialized set of cells that are what he calls an intercalated, which means that they're interdigitated or exist alongside other epithelial cells or skin cells. So the neurons are cells that exist in between skin cells that develop processes, and they develop a certain function, and then eventually they segregate out from the skin cells into their own layer and form a brain inside of that. There's also the chemical brain hypothesis, which is that neurons are the cells that process chemical signals, but they exist in this layer of neurons and skin cells, and then eventually those become a specialized set of cells called neurons, and they form their own central nervous system. So this is a really interesting blog post on some of these issues of development and evolution and how these things happen. So this is I like this article a lot. Finally, I wanted to talk about this class that I'm going to be teaching this spring. So this is actually in project management. So this is a lot of the stuff we've talked about in the meeting today. We have a Discord that you might want to join if you're interested in this. This is our educational Discord, education and big unfinished ideas. So if you're not a member of this, you'll join this Discord, and there's a channel for project management. And so that's where this course is going to live. And so this course is about project management skills, developing project management skills, but from an open source and working open perspective. So what I want to do in this course is I want to impart, a lot of these skills about open source and about working open collaboration, distributed collaboration. This prerequisite isn't going to stand for our group, but in person, the class I'm teaching, it's part of their department. It's 205. It's basically, you should be able to do some sort of programming, but it's not. If you're doing it through the lab here, it doesn't matter so much because you're not going to be graded on it necessarily. There's some readings that you might be interested in. There's this book that I found that's actually really interesting if you're interested in this area. Program Management for Open Source Projects. How to Guide Your Community-Driven Open Source Project. This is by Ben Cotton, who works with one of the big open source communities. I think it's, I can't remember what organization it is, but it's one of the big ones. And he's really, a lot of what he did, I developed this syllabus before I read this book, and then I read the book, and it really kind of paralleled a lot of what was going on with what I planned to do. So it's actually a good thing to go read. And, if you're interested in trying to build a project that maybe goes to the next step and tries to build products or something like that, which is what we talked about earlier, that this is a good resource for that. There are a lot of open source projects. It's not so much that they're building products in the conventional sense. They're building these open source platforms that people are going to use in the long term. So a lot of the Linux operating system forks, like Ubuntu, are like this, where you have a basic sort of architecture, and then people fork it and they build their own instance. It's kind of like Mastodon, actually, where Mastodon is an open source platform. It's like an architecture that you can fork and build your own instance, and then that's something that people will use for things. It's a product in the sense that it's a release, but it's not like a paid product. You're trying to build this thing that does something for people. So that's it's a different type of program management that you have to do for this, and there are other resources. One of the things I want to impart early is this idea of working open. So why do we want to work open? And what I mean by working open is that you want to be able to work in a transparent manner. You want to have be able to like work in distributed teams. So if I work in my home and you work on the other side of the world, we should be able to share resources. Like think about how to coordinate our efforts and get something done. So this is something I want to impart early. I also want to impart this idea of working in version control, especially with GitHub or other types of code sharing. So managing version control, managing documentation, being able to use version control to your advantage, working collaboratively and asynchronously, and then managing resources like open data and metadata. Then there's community resource management, which is, how do you build a community around your project? We're going to talk about collaboration tools, community standards, and then documentation is also very important. And then that community, though, is based on public discussions and events. So you're going to have like hackathons or docathons or ideathons. And these are events where you actually do the work of bringing people together, maybe doing something like a sprint where you work on a set of problems where it might take you 2 months to do it. You can sit down in a virtual room in the space of 7 hours and maybe knock out some documentation or some module or something. So it just speeds up the process of interacting. Or you could have an event where you ask people, what kind of features do you want to see? It could be a brainstorming session. Those are the kind, but you have to manage those events, and it's very subtle on how to do that. There's a lot of organization behind the scenes. You also want to do things like work on community interactions. So if we have like a forum like a Slack or a Discord, we want to be able to manage that. We want to say there's a thread of conversation here that's useful for our project. How do we turn that into a GitHub issue? Or how do we turn that into something we can use later? And we do that sometimes in this meeting where we go to the Slack and we talk about different threads and things that are in different channels. And it's kind of like not letting that kind of die off into the ether, but capturing it and making action items out of it. So that's going to be a thing. And then project scope and types of contribution. Again, this is about creating issues, creating a project scoping strategy. So, what do I want to do in the next 6 months or a year? What kinds of issues can we make that we can put on a board and say, this is something that is to do, this is something in progress, this is something that maybe if the right person comes along, they can grab onto and start to move forward. And so then for the in-person class, they're going to do a paper where they sort of lay out a project of that interests them, that they kind of apply some of these principles to. So, if you have a project, say like Brian's project on sustainable open source software or model, model aggregation, then you would write a paper on that. But then you would write a paper on how do I sort of manage the open source aspect of this? How do I build a community? How do I get people from around the world to work on it? So that would be that midterm check-in. That's going to be the part that's in person. Then the next part is project and community sustainability. How do we keep projects alive? How do we encourage people to become maintainers and leaders? Then there's this project life cycle, which is, of course, thinking about the life cycle of the project. Where does the project end? Where does it evolve? These sorts of things. The financial and budgeting, which is, something we don't think about, but well, we talked about grants and fundraising. There are different strategies for that, which we'll cover. And then there's a final set of presentations, which I don't know what we'll do for the lab participants, but I think that if people are interested in sort of this pedagogical aspect, we can do this. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. But anyways, that's going to happen this spring.
That's great. Do you know about how, like, when it would start? Just out of curiosity, because I definitely want to be involved or at least come to some of the sessions. But
Yeah.
is it in March or
Well,
February?
the term starts in January, but I don't know how we'll do. I'm going to make some lectures, and then it'll be week by week, and then we might actually, have them like in the Slack be more flexible in terms of how the lab participates.
Okay.
So
cool.
we'll see.
Yeah, I just got that Ben Cotton book now because I need it.
Okay, yeah,
so
yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll definitely come to this class, participate as much as possible. It'll be very helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great. Jesse, the pedagogical aspect is like the assignments is what I meant. But
yeah, okay, cool. Short answer, I'm interested. Let me know the timeline and the dates. Depending on a variety of things, I'm interested in helping out. I don't know if you're going to have like TAs or proto TAs or any kind of involvement that way, but at the very least, I wouldn't mind. I think I can be a legit student in the course depending on the dates and the deadlines of it. And that sounds exciting.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, it's just going to be me. I don't know TAs on it, but I mean, I think like there's some participation. I might ask, if you did produce some videos on some of the stuff on project management, so I might actually draw upon that in the class or that sort of thing. So
sounds good. Definitely keep updated. I don't know where are you, like, are you housing talk about this in like a Mastodon, which I just joined now, or like someplace else, or in Slack?
That was like I mentioned at the beginning, there's this Discord that it's that big big ideas Discord, education Discord. Yeah, there it is, the link.
Cool.
So that's where it'll be.
Let's join the Discord. Oh, it's our own Discord.
Yes, it is.
Should definitely be there. All right, cool. Well, I just joined that too.
All right.
Great.
All right. Well,
John Blaze.
What was that?
Jesse, are you John Blaze?
I am. Yes. That's my main thing, and then I change it to be more there because it's the history of that term is so great, including like the '90s reference to like, man, it's John Blaze from like some Biggie Smalls, if you know that song. I think it's Kick in the Door, but it was I'm John Blaze, and John Blaze is the it was a term that meant like really cool, and then it means a lot of other things, and it was originally like from a comic book character. So it's just a great term among my friends. But I will change it to my real name soon. But.
Okay.
Oh no, I was just surprised. I was like, whoa.
Cool. So that's the course. Anything else we wanted to say? I feel like I have a bunch of questions, but I don't have them on my mind, and I want to follow up on some things. In Slack or whatever.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. Well, I don't know. However we want to try to wrap things up or say more a bit. Yeah, okay.
Well, what I'll do is I'll do what I was going to do on the video, and then I'll put it up on YouTube and people can watch it there. So because they don't know what's going on here. But well, anyways, thank you everyone for meeting. Have a good holiday season, and we'll talk to you next year.